Well, welcome back to another episode of Generation to Generation, Bridging the Gap with Rex.
And Eva, and we're so excited to have you here with us today. We're talking about one of my favorite people in the world, which is you. Well, you're going to be telling us a little bit about your story, reintroducing yourself for all of our new listeners, and for the video, for the podcast. And I'm so excited just to get to hear you because you have an incredible story.
Well, I do have an incredible story, and sometimes it's hard to tell, as much as I've told it. You know that I am passionately trying to finish my first book, and we're almost done. We're about 98% through of getting it ready to go back to the editor and then get ready for the layout and the cover design. And just excited about that process, excited for people to be able to read about it. And I've had people for years ask me about, hey, do you have a book? And I've kind of sheepishly, embarrassingly had to say, nah, it's a great story, but I don't have a book. But in
You're about
about,
to.
yes, in I think about no later than 60 to 90 days, we're going to have a book available.
By the end
So
of the
anyway.
year.
Yep.
No,
Well, by the end of summer, actually. I
really.
think by the end of the summer, we're going to have it. I think by the end of August is the current projection. So, anyway, just kind of reintroducing us, the podcast, our stories. Can't wait for you to tell your story on the next episode. But my story, I tend to break into four quarters. I read a book in 1995 called Halftime. It was by a guy named Bob Buford, and that book impacted my life tremendously. Matter of fact, it's the first book outside of the Bible. Halftime had an incredible lasting impact on the way I see the world, on the way I think about my life, about timelines, everything. And there have been some that have kind of added to that over the years. But I had a parachute. It's kind of interesting. I had a parachute accident in 1995, the same year that Halftime was released. And so I was recovering from that accident when that book came out. And it just kind of helped me put my life in perspective. But obviously, people know, football fans, America's a big football country. He used the football analogy that we get two halves to our life: first half, second time, and halftime. Around the time you're 40 years old, you should go through this adjustment period where you're looking at what you've learned the first 40 years of your life, and then you should be making the halftime adjustments. Hey, what do we want the rest of our life to look like, and how do we plot that path forward? And so, again, it made a big impact on me. And Bob Buford died, I can't remember what year he did, but when I saw it, I think it was maybe 2017, I went back and calculated, well, how many quarters did Bob Buford get? He didn't know. But how many quarters did he get within the two halves? And he got roughly 20 years a quarter. So for me, as a 65-year-old, I am in the opening minutes of the fourth quarter. I just frame my life that way, and I think it's helpful. I hope the fourth quarter is a long, long quarter. You and I have talked about that, but again, it just helps me frame my life. So the first quarter for me was tragedy. It was extreme tragedy. Um, I lived in Memphis, Tennessee. I was born to a single mother. She had a hard time making ends meet, and we actually lived across the street from Elvis in
My
Graceland.
friends think that's the coolest thing ever because I have a lot of friends who are big Elvis fans, and they think you're like the coolest person ever for growing up across the street from Graceland. And I'm like, mm.
Okay, well, what for those that are familiar with the kind of historic landmark that Graceland is now across the street and kind of in both directions, they've turned that into a Elvis visitor center. And there's a big museum there, a lot of souvenir shops. The Lisa Marie aircraft, his personal
Which is
private
really funny.
aircraft. Yeah, which is really funny about, well, I don't know this for a fact, but I think roughly where the Lisa Marie aircraft currently sits, that used to be a trailer park, a low income trailer park. and that's where my mother and I lived. And I've got a lot of memories from just being down the street, so to speak, from Graceland across the street and then down just a little bit. But the Gridiron Cafe, I always got to give a shout out to the Gridiron Cafe. It was just this little hole in the wall restaurant on the very end of a strip mall, and it's still there. You and Mom and I have visited. It's now called, what is the name of that place?
I don't remember.
I think it's Big Bill's Barbecue is the
Yeah,
name of it. It's in the book. But oh my gosh, I had a black. I was like a kid in a candy
you
store
were.
when we went back to that little hole in the wall
Made
place
you a grilled
because I
cheese.
had these cool memories of just sitting on the bar. They had these little spin around bar stools, and I would sit on those bar stools for hours. And anyway, it was a big deal for Mom to buy me a grilled cheese sandwich and a root beer. That was a big deal back then. And but she had a hard time making ends meet. We moved in with my grandparents, and that's where the story really kind of turns bad. All three of the adults that I lived with, they died within a 2.5 year period. The first year, my grandfather, actually my grandmother was first. She got killed in a head-on car accident. And then roughly at the end of that year, it may have even been 6 months later, my grandfather died of a heart attack. And then a year and a half later, my mother died of cancer. So again, in about a 2.5 year period, the three adults that I lived with died, and it rocked my world. It would anybody. I was 5 years old, so from the period of 5 to 7 is when that happened, and it just made me withdraw. I just, kind of just turned inward, and I'm like, hey, don't touch me. Don't tell me you love me. Just leave me alone. I'm trying to figure this out. And it was, some people say traumatic. I'm very careful in the words that we use. A kid that's abused, that's traumatic. I had tragedy. That's the word I prefer to use. It was extremely tragic. But that's where the story turns. My grandmother's baby sister wasn't much older than my mother. And she and her husband adopted me, and I moved to a little farm town in Wynne, Arkansas. Shout out to Wynne, Arkansas. Go Hogs, go Red Wolves. Love my home state. Just got a lot of great memories in that little farm town. And, again, I was still recovering from the tragedy. I was very withdrawn. I was very shy. I was just trying to figure life out. But I had some great friendships in that town, and my mom and dad, my adopted mom and dad, began to nurse me back to health, and it's nothing but a good news story from that point on. So that's kind of the first quarter, and at the end of the first quarter, going into the second, I went off to college, and college was an extremely good experience for me. I pledged at fraternity, loved that experience. I was the student government president at Arkansas State, and got a national award, went to the White House, ate lunch with a sitting president. It was just unbelievable, my college experience. And so joined the Army right out of college, spent 22 years on active duty, and had a parachute accident during that time that really changed my life. It's where I had a true encounter with Jesus Christ. It changed my life. And it's in the book. It's in the book, and it's a phenomenal story. Not going to go into that on the podcast, but so much that I've learned through that accident. I made a complete total recovery, which is miraculous. I've still run a couple of miles 3 times a week. I do 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups every day. I had a broken back from that injury, at least a crushed back, and split my pelvic girdle completely apart. I broke my hip in 2 places. And so to continue to do what I do physically really is miraculous. And I'm so grateful to God for just the life that He's given me, Eva, with you, with your mother, with our friends, with our church family. I just can't believe that my life has turned out like it has with the just, I'm going to call it abrasive, the abrasive manner in which my life started. From that point to this point, I get up every day and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. This is amazing. And so I've just had a good life. But the parachute accident really did change me, and it's the title of my book. It's called Free Fall, because maybe you haven't had a parachute not open, but I guarantee you, every person listening to this podcast, you've had a free fall in life. And I can guarantee you, an actual physical free fall, it is the most disconcerting feeling you could ever have in your life. When you know that the ground is coming and there's not a lot you can do about it, you're running out of options. It is disconcerting. That's the best word I can use for it. But maybe you didn't have a parachute, didn't open, but I guarantee you every person's been through their version of a free fall, whether it's a divorce, whether it's the loss of a loved one. Could have been unexpected. It could have been sudden. You could have gone through a financial catastrophe. You could have gone through some type of addiction. Every person's been through some type of physical, spiritual, emotional, or mental free fall. And that's what the book's about. Hey, how do we get back on our feet? How do we regain our balance after we've had a free fall? And so for me, that was through the person of Jesus Christ, a personal relationship. And that's been fantastic now for 30 years. I've been in church all my life, but I'm not talking about being in church. I'm talking about a relationship with a living Savior. And that's really the third quarter for me. I had a great second quarter finishing out. Then the third quarter, after 22 years in the Army, I've spent 10 years with a large commercial construction company as a financial analyst, and then I've had the privilege to be on the church staff as a pastor for the last 10 years. So I love my life. It is awesome. I have a great wife that I've been married to for 33 years this month. And then I have a phenomenal daughter that hosts a podcast with, that co-host a podcast with me. And so all that to say, life is incredible. 4 syllables, incredible.
So we left off at in the second quarter, right? So that's what, finishing your Army career, all of that. Well, what's now? Because you just said you've entered the first couple of minutes of your fourth quarter. So what happened during the third quarter? We've talked about your upbringing. We've talked about, what shaped you. What was that turning point in your life, that free fall, and what did you do after that? How did you get from where you were then to where you are now?
Well, I went very quickly through that. The third quarter for me was really the 10 years at the construction firm. And that was a godsend for me, really. I try not to drop names on our podcast, but hey, shout out Cadell Construction in Montgomery, Alabama. They were a godsend for me because they operate their business very much like the military. They're very structured. They have a set of policies and procedures in the way that they operate their business, and that was very familiar to me. But they also operate their business as a small family business, and I felt like I had been there my whole life from the minute I walked in the door. They were just my people, and even though some of them had been in the company for almost 20 years plus, they treated me like I had been there with them that whole 20 years. And so it was just a phenomenal experience. And, in terms of your life story, when I left the military, I wanted to do something else. Sometimes I debate whether I should have stayed in the military longer than I did. I just felt like it was time to move on to the next chapter. And I don't have a lot of regrets in my life, Eva, but I do feel like I left potential on the table. And I don't have a lot of fears in life, but I heard a movie line one time that stuck with me. And the opening line of the movie, somebody was interviewing a young woman, and they said, "What's your greatest fear?" And she said, "Unrealized potential." And I'm like, I think it's one of the best things I've ever heard. That's a fear for me. And not fear in the way that, you walk around fearful and concerned about it, but fear in the recognition that, hey, you don't want to leave things on the table. Well, I'm trying to teach you in this moment, and this is for everybody on the podcast. Hey, don't leave unrealized potential on the table. And I felt like I did that by leaving the military at 22 years. And so I do regret that to a degree because I think there was more in me. I think there was more leadership for me to offer. And so you have to evaluate that in hindsight. And so anyway, that was the transition to the construction company. But I loved my time at the construction company because they challenged me, they taught me new things. And my point in talking about that was if I was going to get out of the military, I wanted to do something totally different, and not, not to. I'm trying to look for the word to negate, minimize in any way those people that do choose to transition out of the military and stay in the defense sector. We truly need that. I honor your service and what you're doing. There's a lot of folks that do that, and I think that works for them. But for me, I don't know, Eva, maybe it was even a part of me that wanted to prove that I could do something besides the military. I've always been an achievement driven person. So I knew I could achieve in the military. I did that, but I thought, well, you've never really been in the civilian sector. Can you make it in a civilian job? Can you make that transition and be successful in something that's 180 degrees out from what you were doing in the military? So Cadell Construction gave me the opportunity to do that. And if they know this, everybody at that company knows this. If it hadn't been for my next opportunity, I would still be at Cadell Construction because I loved that company and those people so much. But the next opportunity came along, and that was being a pastor on a church staff. And at heart, I knew that's where I was ultimately supposed to be because as a young person, I really felt called to be a pastor, to be in full-time ministry. But my dad was a pastor, and he was so big. The dude was bigger than life and set such an incredible example. I just felt like there's no way I can live up to that. I can't be him. I can't talk like him. I can't do a sermon like him. I can't be a pastor like him. Those are traditional lies that the enemy tells people. They always try, or the enemy tries to get us to compare our worst with someone else's best. It's called the comparison game. You know that. And I
We've talked
played
about
that.
it.
We've talked about it, and I played that with my dad. I played the comparison game, and I let the enemy talk me out of my calling for years. And I think God had, I don't think, I know, God had a specific path for me because as a pastor, I feel much more equipped because I did spend so much time in the workplace. I spent 22 years on active duty. I jumped out of airplanes. I've been in combat. I've been in a boardroom. I've looked at financial statements. I had the privilege to manage the cost projections for $1 billion worth of construction projects. That's a B, not an M, a billion with a B. And that it was a great company that had a huge international footprint. And they taught me a lot. They taught me about a lot about business, a lot about contracts, a lot about negotiations, estimates, the whole thing. And great experience. But again, I knew I was called to be a pastor. But my experience in the U.S. Army and with Cadell Construction prepared me exceptionally well to deal with people as a pastor. So that's kind of the third quarter. And then now I am trying to finish well and make a difference in people's lives. And that's what our podcast is about. We're just looking to help a few people. We're not looking for a platform. We're not looking to be social media influencers, but people that are having a challenge talking to each other, whether it's family members, whether it's a son and a dad, or a daughter and a dad, or maybe a dad and a mom, whatever the case is. We just believe that the reason we started this is to help people have authentic conversation across the generations.
Yeah.
That's my story.
That's your story. It's an incredible story. And I think when you talk about it, I see a lot of similarities in my own struggles and like the wisdom. Like I've played the comparison game. I've I constantly have worried whether I was fulfilling my purpose, whether I was had missed opportunities by being homeschooled, doing things like that. And so, like, a beautiful thing in this podcast is, and I mean, we just talked about it in the previous one, but this podcast isn't for others, in my opinion. It's I feel like so much of it is just me getting recordings of your wisdom. And there's so much you have taught me over the years, and so many lessons that you started teaching, back when I was 3 or 4, that, like, I'm still learning, that you're still developing, that you're still teaching, that, you'll always be a teacher in my life. As much as you are a father, as much as you are a pastor, you are also an incredible teacher. And I think something that has come from your years of experience, from being in the military, from teaching ROTC, from having, all of these tragedies, from working in construction, is you are an incredible teacher. You know how to communicate with people well, you love people well, and you are one of the greatest teachers in my life. You are a father, and then you are my teacher, because there are so many lessons that I have learned, and while they're not the same circumstances, the principles and values of them don't change. And I think that's something we've also talked about a lot is, the circumstances may change in these lessons, but the principles and values of them do not. And that's something that can be seen back for thousands of years. Being Christians and obviously believing in the absolute truth of the Bible, the circumstances may change, but the absolute truth and the values don't. And that's the same thing with your lessons. Is there's so many lessons that people would discredit simply because, it's because he was in the army, or because, he was born in the 60s, or all of these things because he's older. But there's so many things that you can learn just by talking to you. And I think that's why you have such an incredible influence in my generation, in younger people's lives, is because you know how to teach these lessons because you've lived them. You know how to take these lessons because you've lived them, and teach people how to apply them. And so I think that's such an incredible part of your story is there's so much, we talk about unrealized potential, but there's so much potential that I don't even think you've realized of how big of an impact you've had on people's lives, and how many lessons you've taught people that they probably don't even realize was a lesson. They just applied it. And so I think that's something really, really, really cool about getting to call you my dad, is you're also an incredible teacher because you have all of these lessons.
Love you. You're amazing, and you're hired for my publicist. You're
Right?
you're awesome, Eva. I can't. I don't even know how to respond to that because again, you and I have we have a unique relationship, and my dad and I had a unique relationship, and that's our heart for every parent that's listening to this, and every teenager or young person. You can have a good relationship with the people in your life, but it does require transparency, honesty. We've got to be authentic with each other. We've got to be genuine, and we've got to realize that, you know what, I'm so grateful that you think I'm such a great teacher, Eva. But part of being a great teacher is realizing that you don't know it all. And
Yeah.
the older that I have grown, I like to call it well seasoned. I am not getting older. I am just well seasoned at this point in my life. I'm teaching right now. The older you get, the more you're going to realize how much you don't know.
Yeah.
Because you begin to evaluate your wisdom not in comparison to other people, but in comparison to God. And I relate so much to Job in the last few chapters of the book of Job. Job says, I had heard about you, but now I've seen you with my own eyes, and I despise myself. That's a pretty harsh narrative, but what Job is saying is, hey, I thought I knew you. I thought I knew about you. But now I've had a personal conversation with you, and now that I have seen you and I truly know you, what Job is saying is, I know how little that I truly know
Yeah.
about life, about others, about this whole thing that you created, God. And the older we get, the more seasoned we get, I think we begin to step into that realm that, yeah, I've had a lot of great life experience, and you just said it. You can't teach what you haven't lived. And so that's the advantage that those of us that are more well seasoned have. But I want you to know that as we do get older, we also realize how little we do know in this big scheme of things that God laid out in front of us. And all I know is this: I have loved the ride. I enjoy being on the ride. I enjoy doing the ride with you and your mom. And we are going to ride this thing for all it's worth, and we're going to shut the park down. Right?
Yes, 100%. 100%. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story, but we were at breakfast one morning or lunch. I texted you and I was like, you want to go get lunch? And it was like, like when older people are like, oh, like they'll like somebody they know when they like see you. It was like that man, that woman at Jimbo's. And he was like, oh, like this old guy, like you must like be the better version of him or something like that, or like you must be better than he is or something. And I was like, no, like honestly, like there's so much that I could have learned from you and so many lessons and mistakes that I've made that if I had just paid closer attention to your wisdom and taken closer to your teachings, that I would not have made those mistakes. But it took me making those mistakes to grow, and taking your wisdom of you coming in and advising me after I had made the mistake, that helped me grow into a better person. And I think that's something so beautiful about it, is in life you're going to make mistakes, but who you surround yourselves with after is really going to impact how you grow and how you change from it. Because if you surround yourself with people who keep you sitting in that mistake and don't keep you growing and don't help you improve, you're going to continue to identify yourself by that mistake. And if you surround yourself by people who only talk bad about it, then you're going to identify it as a bad mistake, and you're going to take that identity of it. But I've made mistakes. I've played the imposter syndrome. I've cheated. I've compromised my integrity. I've done these things. But you have all of these lessons, and surrounding myself with people like you, like mama, like my mentors in my life, y'all encourage me not to let it define me, but to let it to be a step that helps me grow into a better person, to let it be a step that helps me grow into who I am, and to help make me a stronger person in my identity, not become part of it. And so that's something that's super important that I think you can learn from the lessons, and that's a huge part of conversation, especially with people my age, because I'm 18 years old. I'm about to go to college. Like, there's so much that I still have to learn about life, and it's very easy for my generation, for kids my age, to think we know it all, because we have the knowledge of the world in the palm of our hands. It's very easy for us to believe we know it all, but we don't, because there's a lot that can't be taught from a TikTok video or from a YouTube video or from ChatGPT, because it comes from people who have actually lived it and who have learned it. And if we don't learn how to communicate with them, history is going to repeat itself, and we're going to make those same mistakes, and we're not going to surround ourselves with people who can help us move past it. And so that's what's so important about your story and about your lesson, is the people that surround themselves with you around you, they're going so much farther because you've made so many mistakes, which is valid. We all make mistakes, but you've made mistakes, and you can say, here's how you can get past it. Don't let this define you. Don't let this become a part of you. You have a greater purpose. You have a greater plan, and here's the potential that you don't see that I see in you. And so that's something that's super important. And that's what generation to generation communicating it is when, as somebody who's 18, when I talk to kids younger than me, they look up to me. My words matter. My stories matter, because I'm the one that's closest in age to them, that in 10 years they're going to be doing the exact same thing I'm doing. Whereas when I'm talking to people 10 years older than me, their words matter to me, because they're 10 years away from where I am now. They've gone past it. They've moved past it. They've learned through those experiences. And so if we don't communicate with people outside of our bubble, outside of our world, and outside of our sphere, we're bound to make countless mistakes. And that's what's so important about it, is being comfortable, being uncomfortable, asking questions, and knowing that your words matter. And that's something that I've learned from you.
Well, I think it's great, Eva. And good leaders ask great questions. And so let's just keep asking them of each other. There's so many things I wish I would have. I asked my dad, a lot of questions, but in hindsight, there are so many things that I wish I would have asked him when he was around. And it's one of those things you just don't know.
Yeah.
But there are numerous times that something would come up, and I'm like, wow, I would really love to know what my dad would have thought about that and how he would have answered that question. But that's one of the cool things that you and I have in this podcast and in this moment, is that we get to ask questions.
Yep.
And so anyway, it's been, I think this is a wrap on this episode, but it has been so much fun hanging out with you. Love it. And again, regardless, the tag, regardless of what
Regardless of what
happens,
happens,
let's
let's
always be
always
able
be
to
able to
talk
talk from
From
generation
generation to
to
generation.
generation.
We got to get the lag
Well,
time.
yeah. It's a little bit off. We may have to break it up some, you know. But if you like what we talk about, if you like our stories, you can follow us on Facebook at Generation to Generation. You can follow us on Instagram at G2G_podcast. We're on YouTube now. You can watch our podcast, these recordings. It's called Generation to Generation. You can email us.
On YouTube now.
We're on YouTube. Whoop. And if you go to our podcast, there should be a button that says, like, you have questions or feedback, text us. Send us, it's like called fan mail on our side of things. If you send us to it, you DM us on our platforms, reach out to us, ask questions. We would love to talk about them because chances are we've been through it or we know somebody who has, and we can help talk about it. We can share our opinions and our advice because sometimes it helps having a little bit of outside opinions. And so just reach out to us. We run out of topics all the time, and you probably have some things going on, and so we would love to hear from you.
Absolutely.